ninth chapter. It is September, of our exploration of Rabbi Ayelet Cohen's book as a way of celebrating our 50th anniversary by looking back a little bit. And in each chapter, we've tried to explore some things in the chapter. This is not exhaustive. I will remind everybody, we're not covering every single thing. We're using the 50th anniversary as an opportunity to look back and think about places we've been as a community through the experiences of CBST congregants, rabbis, cantors, music directors, but just music, we've only had one music director. And so that's what we're doing here tonight. Now this chapter, chapter 9, and as I say each week, some of the chapters are chronological and some of the chapters are thematic. And we're now in the thematic section of the book. And the theme of this month's exploration are celebrations. And what I've invited Judy and Lori to talk about being in the adult Bar Mitzvah program. They were in the program that graduated in 2005. And they are here as representatives of a program that has now graduated somewhere over 80 students, adult students, since I came to CBST and started the program. So we're going to talk a little bit, and they're going to reflect on that part of the CBST world. And Jay and Michael, the book is wrong. So Marcia, you got to know, we have a mistake in the book. The ceremony... Okay, yes. So you got to give $1,000 to the synagogue now, Michael. Yes, it was so funny when Michael told me about the mistake. He said, "But I'm not giving $1,000 for this report." They're going to be talking about and exploring in June of 1993, not August. In June of 1993. We celebrated what we were calling then commitment ceremony of the two of Michael and Jay, but what made it even more special was that it was celebrating Alex and Rita's 50th anniversary reaffirmation of their vows. So we had double couples underneath the chuppah, and in 1993, I don't need to tell you how unusual it was to have parents standing underneath the chuppah. So they're going to be talking a little bit about that, and we're exploring two ways that CBST has taken very traditional life cycle events and done them entirely differently than the rest of the world. And maybe, today we would say queerifying what a bat mitzvah is, and queerifying what a celebration of love looks like in all different kinds of ways. So we're going to be looking at that. Your ceremony was in 2005, and yours was in 1993. So that was the first year I was at CBST. I'd started in August of 92, so in June of 93, we did that celebration in Bethune Street. So then, as usual, the same process. I'm going to ask some questions to each of them, and then we'll open it up, and other people could ask questions or talk about any of these focusing on the issue of life cycle celebrations is kind of the theme for tonight. And as a reminder, next month, which is our 10th, this kind of math I can do, is going to explore education at CBST. And then November will be social justice at CBST. I'm not going to talk about that now. We have a great program for both of those. So let's start with the two of you, and starting with the celebration of your becoming an adult bat mitzvah. And so I'm wondering if both of you can talk a little bit about your process to decide to do it, and what the process was of going through it, and maybe a little reflection on the impact, so it's three parts a little bit, on the impact you feel looking back on what it's done for your life. Good and bad. This isn't hasbara. You could say whatever, there's no right answer, and it's not, it can... Okay,
just check it off. It was all good.
You have to use a microphone, otherwise they can't hear you.
Okay, I'm checking off. It was all good. So, I had been bat mitzvahed, and I think Lori also should talk about it. I had been bat mitzvahed when I was 12 years old at the Highland Park Conservative Temple, in which they on a Friday night, they threw 12 of us, we studied, so to speak, and we were 12 of us divided into 3 groups, and we sang the Haftorah together, or in sections. And so when this opportunity came up...
Judy, I want to tell you, my bat mitzvah in a conservative synagogue in 1972 was the same. So there wasn't a lot of progress in the conservative movement when it came to women and girls.
Yes. Then Sandy Warshaw, who was in our cohort and actually got bat mitzvah on the same Shabbos that Lori and I were, wanted me to come to the first meeting. I think she was a little afraid because she had been raised Reform, and I don't think she even really knew the Hebrew alphabet. And so I came, and I totally engaged with interacting with people, and I thought, I want to be part of this group. And so we, I think, had an extra year. We were 3 years.
Turned it to 3 years at that point.
And I knew some Hebrew, so I took private lessons in Hebrew because I was already at a level that some people were going to hope to be their goal because they were just learning Hebrew. So as I wrote in my little blurb, that it was the beginning of an intense and serious quest in Jewish studies. I subsequently joined the Kohenet, the Hebrew Priestess Institute, with Rabbi Jill Hammer, ordained there after 3 years, and have just kept studying. So I'm
All inspired by the bat mitzvah you did at CBST.
Yes, definitely. Right. It was
That's so
CBST
moving.
all the way, inspired by and seriously it was.
Right, and part of what we see, it's so moving to me for an adult learner to dive in, and then this is X number of years later. Judy is still taking so many different classes all over, and obviously all over the world with the Zoom situation, and that's so inspiring.
Yes, it's tiring, however. Maybe next year I'll learn tennis. Okay, Lori. Lori? Are you?
Is that it? That's not it. Is that it? That's not it. I'll use this.
It would start up to your mouth.
Okay. I was also bat mitzvahed when I was 13. I belonged to, our family synagogue was originally an Orthodox synagogue. It is now a conservative synagogue. But my sister was the first person who was bat mitzvahed, first female who was bat mitzvahed in April 1961. I came along 6 years later, and it was very different. People say to me, "Oh, you were bat mitzvahed on a Friday night, weren't you?" I said, "No, I was bat mitzvahed on a Sunday morning." So I read my Haftorah, and I gave a speech, and the cantor did some blessing, and that was it. And it was just me. It wasn't a group. Did you get presents? Yeah, sure. I got presents. My parents had a party, of course. So when 2002 came along and they announced that we would be doing a new B'nai Mitzvah cohort, my partner at the time said to me, "Would you do this with me?" And I said, "Nah." I said, "I already did this when I was 13. So, and then the heavy hitters came in. Judy and Sandy came in. They said, "Why did you do this with us?" And I said, "I don't know." And they said, "After all, if you don't like it, you can quit." Well, that was it. That was the gauntlet that was thrown down. I thought, I'm not quitting. I'm going through with this. And it was one of the best experiences of my life. That's the only way I can explain it. And I think that the people who have gone through B'nai Mitzvah recently would agree. It's an accomplishment that you wouldn't normally have unless you're in a setting like this. And you have to stretch. So I did that. Our class almost completely went to Israel in 2003. And we were considered to be the largest non-Orthodox group in Israel at that time because it was the time of the Second Intifada. And So just knowing stuff like that was really great. I have not continued on the way Judy has, and I really stand in awe of her. But we had a good time. And at the ceremony itself, when I finished, Judy and I split the Haftorah. It was the second longest Haftorah in the Torah. And so we split it. And when I finished, because I was very nervous, I took off the yarmulke I was wearing, and I exchanged it for, Sandy had gotten a whole bunch of red yarmulkes to hand out, and I took the red yarmulke, I put it on, I said, like any good graduate, I moved my tassel from left to right. So it was an accomplishment. I'm really glad I went through with it. It was very exciting, and it also, what's the word I want? Confirmed a lot of my friendships, et cetera, and that this is a community, and it's a community that can be relied upon.
I'll say one more thing. There were we started really much right after 9/11. So you had some classes, and then we started the group a little after 9/11. And about 19 started. And I think that one or two dropped out. Most everybody stuck in. It was a very large class, and not as large as I think the last one was here, because you could pull from all over the world, really. But we were large, and we were committed.
It's a beautiful thing to also watch, to actually, and think about how many places in life that you create a community around study. You create a community around accomplishing, learning really important new things that are not necessarily relevant to making money or a job or a degree. You're not getting it's not a degree, but it's studying really lishma for the sake of studying and creating this community cohort. When I first came to CBSD, we did a few adult bar and bat mitzvahs individually, and then I quickly realized if we did everybody individually, first of all, it would just be too difficult to really organize, but secondly, what it would not accomplish is exactly what the two of you are describing, and so many of you have experienced, which is creating a sense of a little community and a sense of a cohort. And that was part of the idea, is creating a sense that people would bond together and create a sense of community in the midst of it. All right, now to the two of you. So would you both, or either of you, depending on how you want to share this, talk a little bit about your decision to do a ceremony then, and to do it with Rita and Alex. May their memories be for blessings.
Okay, I met Jay at CBST 39 years ago, and we've been members ever since. We attended regularly. It was our weekly ritual to come on the Friday night. I met him on my third time out. I was brought.
Can Zoom folks hear?
I was brought here thanks to Connie and Ruth, actually, that we called them our fairy godmothers, because I was in a 12-step program, and my sponsor thought that when she learned I was gay, she had spoken to the lesbian couple that had some fame and notoriety and Jewishness. And so I wound up coming in June of 1984, on June 8th, 15th, and on the 22nd, I met Jay Fisher. And both of our lives have changed since then. We both think we met before. We both lived in the same neighborhood. We both attended Brooklyn College during the same years. We both were at a theater when someone had a heart attack, and we thought it was part of the show. So that doesn't happen all that often. So we spent a lot of time. We were both dieting. We were in this 12-step program for weight loss, and we were avoiding the tables of refreshments. So we were like wallflowers in the back, and we were talking to each other, and we went home, and we have the anniversary of the first time we met, the first time we did it, the first time, et cetera, et cetera. And Jay can expand on it a little, because I had no Jewish background, very little. My family sent me to be bar mitzvahed My father was bar mitzvahed just by rote. We never had any observance except to maybe fast half a day and break our Yom Kippur fast with treif, Chinese food. So, after that, I had no religion until I was in the Army. It was interesting because this couple that was here tonight, they met at CBST also and have been together since 30 years ago. But we're 39 years ago. And I lost my train of thought.
So why and how did
why-
you decide to do a
To
ceremony?
get married? You want to go?
Yeah, well, we decided to do a ceremony because we had gone to Israel. We had gone with a right-wing Zionist organization
Eretz Yisrael.
called the Eretz Yisrael movement. And why did we go with them? Because they made the trip so affordable that it was the only way we can go. So when we were there, we had decided we would marry ourselves. We got lost. We wound up in the Arab quarter, and a very nice Arab came over and said, "It's not safe for you to be here." So then then part two of how we came to get married was we had gone to Tel Aviv and we had purchased rings, and by the time we got the rings back to our hotel room in Jerusalem, they turned green. So we had married ourselves in our hotel room under a talit that was our hupper, but we decided that there was a better way of doing this. And we were sitting around the dining room table with Rita and Alex, who began to talk about their 50th wedding anniversary and what they were going to do. And we said, just spontaneously, it was Michael who brought it up, who said, "Why don't we combine your 50th wedding anniversary with the commitment ceremony?" But I think we're going to have to ask Rabbi Kleinbaum's permission for this. Now, one of the interesting things was when the networks got wind of this, they wanted to come down and film the ceremony. And my mother, who was always keen on getting lots of attention, was very disappointed when Rabbi Kleinbaum had said, "No, you can't do that." And it took her a long time to see the wisdom in that. But that's when we decided that we would get married. We approached Rabbi Kleinbaum. She gave us a lot of books to read, Twice Blessed. My mother didn't understand why she had to do any of that. Her reaction was, "Why can't we just have the ceremony? We'll have a nice lunch. We'll have it catered. Everybody will have a great time. Why are we doing this whole preparation stuff?"
Well, I had to make sure they were going to stay together. 50 years,
And
needed
you
to-
made sure that we had wills and powers of attorney and health proxies and things like that. It was very practical. It was also 9 years after we had been together. I was with a man 5 years. I was with a woman for 7 years. Then at this point, I was with Jay 9 years, about 39 years together. I figured he was the winner.
I'm so honored.
But we did have another commitment before the one with you. We participated in a service at Washington, D.C., where they were having a same-sex couples union protest. And we had we got the certificate saying that we were married as the same, but they misspelled both of our names.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the ketubah, because you had said to us that we needed a ketubah, and we would have a lot of trouble getting a ketubah from the Orthodox ketubah stores or wherever you went. And it occurred at the time when I had lost my job, and I said to you, "What's the going rate for ketubahs, Rabbi?" And you said about $2,000, which we couldn't afford, and we were having dinner with Carol Traum and Lisa Kotzman at the time. And Carol and Lisa said, "We have an artist who would do ketubahs, everything would be hand cut, and why don't you get in touch with the artist?" So I, being the organizer in this household, got in touch with the artist. We explained our financial circumstances, and she said, "I'll only charge you $125 if you can tolerate getting the ketubah the day before. That's when it's going to be delivered." And it hangs prominently in our apartment. It's framed. Everybody who comes in marvels at that. It's all hand done with hand cuts.
We also transformed Bethune into a gorgeous space that day with, our colors were lavender and turquoise, little patches in our kippahs. And we had balloons everywhere and colored tablecloths, and we had a caterer. And, when I was bar mitzvahed in '59, I just had an open house. The kids were relegated to the garage and the basement, and the parents were upstairs. I had shared my parsha with two other boys, but I had like half, and they each had a quarter because I could sing. But I felt like all my other friends had lavish affairs, and there were theme parties for bar mitzvahs already. And similarly with weddings, I had gone to so many weddings of our friends and my family, and like I have 22 first cousins. Everybody got married, heterosexual weddings, but I felt I deserved a wedding as well. There's a line out of the Rothschilds musical, Bach and Harnack, that says, we want everything that everyone's entitled to. What another's entitled to, we're entitled to too. And Rita used that as her theme sometimes, that, she doesn't want anything more for her son, but she wants just as much as anybody else.
We had a big discussion about gifts, because originally we were going to say no gifts, and we talked to you about it, and you said you deserve them. You've been giving everybody else gifts all your entire life, so we allowed people to give gifts, and the most surprise gift was from Rita and Alex, a new car.
You're welcome. So let's open it up, and folks have questions of our panelists, or if you have comments and thoughts about this issue, about how we in the CBST world have celebrated life cycle events. That's really what we're thinking about. That's been a little bit different because of who this community is and how you've been impacted in any way.
When I found out that no one was named after my great-grandmother, Sophie, and she died in Theresienstadt, I decided I was going to add her name to my Hebrew name. So officially, we did have an adult baby naming at CBST. Again, there's anything that you could come and think of if you'd ask the rabbi, and then, yeah, let's do it. So the funny thing is that now, when I have to go to Orthodox shuls and I get an aliyah, and they, Yamod, what's your name? I go, Mordechai Sophia ben Chaim. Mordechai Sophia ben Chaim.
That's a great
example.
example.
It's going to be on my tombstone.
It's a great example. Beautiful, Rick. Anybody else? Harold, are you distributing or asking a question?
No, I'm asking a question myself. So we spoke about bar mitzvot, we spoke about weddings, and I think there was a little bit here about baby namings. Funerals are the other big life cycle event that we do as Jews. how have you, in your rabbinate of CBST, changed, adapted funeral services for us?
I think the biggest, well, there are a few different ways I'd answer that. So first of all, since AIDS was so prominent in those early years, I started in the very, very beginning to actually fill in the whole grave, which almost no non-Orthodox synagogue was doing at that time. They'd do a few different shovels or a handful in there, and then everybody would leave, and the workers would come in. But it really struck me standing around an open grave with 25 young men burying a close friend, that this was an incredibly powerful thing to ask these young men to actually physically do the work of the burial. And it really came from watching the circles of young, strong men burying somebody. And it became so moving to me and to everybody, and we never left until the grave was completely filled. And you could see that there was something so powerful in the embodied nature of that grief. Really physically working hard, and it is hard work, as anybody knows, to do more than a couple of shovelfuls, and whether it's freezing cold weather or hot, and it became really a feature of CBST funerals, and it has continued to this day. If it's possible, and we have enough people who are physically able and the weather allows, we fill in the grave completely as a community. And there's only been a few funerals that hasn't happened. And so I think that's now a feature of and it's very meaningful, I think, for all of us to actually be part of the physical act of burial so much in our society, especially around death, but not only, is very separated from the thing itself. In addition, doing shmirah, which we haven't done for everybody, and we have to be careful to do it only when it works, but to actually open up shmirah. Again, so these are two traditionally Orthodox practices that CBST has developed. And Eric Rosenbaum actually has a beautiful piece in the book about doing shmirah, and I don't remember for whom, maybe it was Dick Radvin, and what it meant to him. I can't remember. Who was it for? It was for Dick? It was. And Eric has a beautiful piece in there about sitting, reading, I've forgotten, it wasn't reading a book and poetry, and other people called and came over. And I think that's also something that's happened at CBST. And now by the way, both of those things are happening now at other non-Orthodox synagogues. That wasn't true in the 90s. And I say the third area, which is less true now, both of those are still happening to different degrees based on, is for those of us who remember the period of AIDS, is that we often had to do a second kind of shadow funeral if the families wouldn't acknowledge the gay identity, forget the AIDS cause of death. And so those of you here all remember, we did many funerals where we didn't have the body because the next of kin were the biological family. And so we didn't have the part of going to a cemetery, but we were doing it as a funeral so that we as a community could also talk about him with the fullness of his life. So I think that was that I'd say is a third thing. That is no longer true, but that was a feature, I'd say. Thank you, Harold. And maybe others have ideas that I didn't.
So, as you all know, I have 3 kids who were born in CBST, and they're all now flown the coop. But talking about life events, they've had all of their life events at CBST. So children of gay people growing up here, having a bris or a baby naming, having bar bat mitzvah, having graduation from high school. And it's just, to me, amazing that they've grown up in this community and they feel like CBST is their home.
And next month, we're actually inviting some teens and young people to be the panelists. And some of them are going to be on Zoom because they're obviously not here. So Rabbi Werber is going to be interviewing them about growing up at CBST. And that, I think that's also an interesting to say, that's why we didn't do kids at this one as much, because we're going to do it next month. But that's a profound change. I mean, even from when I came, and there were very, very few kids. My kids were 2 of the only kids who were here. But just both the technology and the social circumstances, that it was okay to have kids. But as I said in one of my showed over the summer, the other thing, and Elle, you and I have talked about this, is the issue about divorce as a life cycle event. And now legal divorce, not just separation and a dissolution of a relationship, but actually legal divorce is now something that's, we now at CBST, we do a religious ceremony for divorce for same-sex couples also. So that's another.
Yeah, I was going to say, I experienced a life cycle ceremony, which I never heard of. So in 1994, when I had this near-death experience, I lost my arm. So the following year, our first intern, David Steinberg, on a Saturday morning at Bethune Street, we went through this thing I never heard of, the Gomel. This is a ceremony when somebody went through a very dangerous time and survived.
To bench Gomel is
Yeah.
a prayer that's said when the Torah is out, when you've had a near death or recovered from an illness or a major life scare.
Right. So
And you'll notice if those of you who are on Facebook, I use the words of Birkat, of benching Gomel in my post.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So this was 1 year after the anniversary, and combining with the Gomel, I chose a new Hebrew name. So the name I chose was the Hebrew translation of my secular name, Oeh, shepherd. So it was kind of like, I liked it, you know.
You took the name Roeh, which
Roeh.
is shepherd.
Shepherd in Hebrew.
In
And
Hebrew,
that's
beautiful.
actually a name in Israel, where shepherd's not so much of a name. It's more of a last name. But Rui is actually a common name, more or less.
Beautiful.
I chose that name.
That's a
and,
great example.
yeah.
So Rick, that's another adult naming, and we do adult namings also anytime somebody becomes a
But
Jew.
the thing is, I never heard of Gomel, but it was very profound for me, very profound. It marked my 1 year survival. Anyway, you know what I mean.
I remember, Shep, I remember. Yeah. I don't remember, you mean in the hospital, yeah. Michael Levine.
Hi, thank you. I have a question for our B'nai Mitzvah women, and it relates to something that I had never heard of before and only heard it at CBST, and that was at one time we had a feminist minyan when we were davening at the Church of the Holy Apostles, and I know that a lot of the women who were at the feminist minyan were also part of the B'nai Mitzvah cohorts. So I'm going to ask both of our, Lori and Judy, were you part of the feminist minyan? Was that something that only existed because of CBST? Did you get the idea from someplace else? And what happened to it? It was a beautiful experience for CBST to have something that welcomed women who felt unwelcome in other locations.
The feminist minyan, I think, was started with Sandy Warshaw, may have been part of it. There may have been other people. It was going on when I...
Yolanda Bodasinski was one of the founders. Is she still here?
Yeah, Yolanda.
Yeah, there's Yo. That was actually founded the year before I started at CBST.
Yeah, and
So it was
I
at
came
Bethune
in.
Street, not the church, actually. That's
it
how
was
old
at
it
Bethune
was.
Street.
Yeah, she wasn't at the very
Sandy
beginning.
was the third generation, and that's about the time that I came in '95. Do you want to say more to answer the question? But it was I don't think it was a new thing for us. I think all over the country, maybe the world, in the 80s and early 90s, women were feminine. From the mid-70s, I think, the feminist movement was gaining traction. We call it the second wave.
Yo, do you want to say something about the creation of the feminist
Yeah,
minyan?
a little bit. I think some of us Roseanne Leipzig, myself, we were brought up very traditionally, conservative, conservadox synagogues, but we always had we wanted to do more. We wanted to be on the bima. We wanted to learn how to read Torah, et cetera, et cetera. And CBST allowed us to do that. It was awkward because, we had to, as women, overcome certain things. But we basically had to petition the board, and it was many men who are actually sitting in this room as well, and we had to just fight for what we wanted, and part of it was, which was great, we created our own prayer book from different parts. I could still see the folder, the blue flexible folder. And what it also did was it brought like super young people into our crowd. And it evolved. Then we started using Marcia Falk's book. It was a CBST special, because there was the period of time where there was many different minions. Like people wanted other things. And I'm just going to say one more thing. The funniest minion was oh God. Oh, yeah, right. The leather minion. But it wasn't called the leather. That was Ron Weiss. Ron Weiss wanted to start the leather minion. And then came the orthopractic minion. But it was an incredible time. It was
And I think one of the reasons that the feminist minion dissolved in some ways ultimately is after several years of my being at CBST, a lot of the liturgy from the feminist minion ended up in our regular service, and the service itself started absorbing a lot of the Debbie Friedman music and Marcia Falk prayers. And then when we did our own Siddur, this Siddur, that our Friday night Siddur, has a lot of feminist, Adrienne Rich and Muriel Rukeyser, and brachot in feminine God language, etc.
When I first came, not here as a parishioner, but I visited, I came to services and a whole bunch of women left as I walked up into the service. It was in Bethune. And so I think those was like 89 or 90, so that was at the beginning. And there were like hardly any women that had stayed for the regular service, but that's all I knew about. And the other thing that made it a little difficult, but the timing, the service used to be at 8:30, and so we had like an hour or so.
Right, so the Friday night service was at 8:30.
And so there was time.
So there was the feminist minion, I think, was from 7 to 8, so that people could theoretically then stay for another service. I mean, but a lot of women just
8:30, can you imagine? We have a
Oh,
lot of people on Zoom.
Yes, let's see about Zoom
And
questions or comments.
either you can unmute yourself or ask them in the chat through Sharon, but let's leave a little space. It's okay to unmute, as long as there's no background noise. Anyone have a question on Zoom? Lori Croatman has a question.
Or comments of
Lori?
I wanted to ask Judy and Lori if you could say the one most significant aspect of your bat mitzvah. What would you say was the most meaningful?
For me, it was laning. I can't sing for anything, and Jack said so nicely, this is not a concert. Consider it more like a folk thing. And it gave, and I was able to do it. It was a big stretch for me. And so it was the most meaningful thing because it was something I never would have been able to do on my own.
Okay, am I on? I'm on. Yeah, I would definitely agree with what Judy said. I found that it was getting through the program and learning about Judaism. It's funny, Judy's comment about what Jack said, because Jack and Ron were integral to our learning how to learn Torah. And it's acquiring skills and thus feeling more comfortable in the synagogue, reading the prayer book, reading the Torah. I mean, it's just, it's the heart of Judaism. So I found it to be very, very integral to who I am.
One other thing is these friends that I have, like Lori, and okay, Sherry's gone. Oh, well, Sherry Dratfield was in our cohort. I don't think anybody else here was in that cohort, but like we said, we had like 19 or 18. 19 or 18, and Sherry was in the cohort. I'm sorry.
You know, most non-Orthodox synagogues now, with some exceptions in the conservative movement, fewer and fewer, most do not teach how to learn Torah. People are given a tape or an MP, whatever it's called, you know, of an audio recording and that they memorize. It's been something that I have felt very, very, very strongly about, that kids and adults should have to struggle to learn how to actually read the Hebrew and then learn the ta'amim, the trope, the cantillation. And even if they only do 2 or 3 psukim, it's better to have kind of, and part of it is because it's completely irrelevant. Like that there's power to this incredibly, and I am saying that, of course, with quotation marks. I think it's deeply relevant, but it's to our modern life, it's not going to give you anything, right, except this deep accomplishment to engage in something ancient that is not, there's too much of a modern world is, how quickly can this be meaningful to me? Some things take hard work, and it becomes meaningful in the learning and struggling and achieving. And I see it with our kids at CBST as well as with the adults, that the actual work to learn the system that is an ancient system, and that you're attaching yourself to an ancient people, when so much of what we do is very thin in the world, this is really deep. And I'm really proud. It's so moving to me. Even if people don't do it again, and a lot of our folks continue, which I'm very happy about, it's an amazing achievement. It's not just a throwaway, for sure. All right, we only have time for a couple of more, either on Zoom or in person.
Well, I just wanted to
Susan?
comment on my own experience. I knew nothing. I knew garnished about Judaism. I learned it in the adult cut, but thank goodness for Jack Greenberg. Yes. And thank goodness for my cohort, Leslie Bernstein. The two of us were able to pull off a B'nai Mitzvah that was beyond belief. And I have my friends, all my secular friends came, and they couldn't believe that I was doing this. It was one of the great moments of my life.
Susan Meyer is the reason we went to a 3-year program, because you came to me and
Yes.
why are we trying to crush this into 2 years? I'm not, turning 13 or 12. I can hang and toast with. It's because of Susan we turned to 3 years so that there would be enough air and space for it to exist. And I want to say something else based on what you just said, Susan. The other thing that I think is special about our community, those of us who are very deeply connected with people who we love who are straight, and watch them go through all different life cycle events and children and weddings where they're the center of attention for all different things. It's so meaningful that for people who are not necessarily going to get that, to have an adult bar mitzvah where what you described, Susan, your friends are showing up, and how many of their ceremonies of different kinds of their kids and their, this and their that, and to say, you know what? Well, this is really meaningful to me and to us, and it's really an important part. Martha, are you saying something? Your friends loved it. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay. Over here. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Hey. Hi. Good Shabbos, everybody.
Good Shabbos.
So, I've been talking to Rabbi Werber about a Hebrew name changing, because I am not Ziva Chana. So, I was wondering, could there be, I don't know who would develop it or whatever, but a little special thing for trans people who
we have a blessing in our
doing
Siddur.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we have a blessing in a bracha in our Siddur, and we do name changes all the time for trans folks. And we have a whole what?
I didn't know because I'm new.
That's okay. I'm glad you asked. But absolutely, that's another great example of and honestly, this is ancient in Judaism, that when people go through something and as an adult, you take on a new name. What Rick just mentioned, what Shep just mentioned, and trans is a part of that. But we have, I don't remember what page, Marcia, do you remember what page in the Siddur? We have a whole thing. Yeah. Marcia published the Siddur. I can't remember. But yes, and sometimes we do the ceremonies at a Torah service. Sometimes we do it Friday night. Some people don't want it to be public at all and really want a quiet one. So CBST's also great strength is that we don't have a one-size-fits-all of just about anything. So we really work with people, and Rabbi Werber will work with you to figure out what's the right ceremony, not only what's the right names. As I said, some people like a private, some people like it at the Torah, and some people do it Friday nights. Well, Mazel Tov, that's wonderful. Congratulations.
One of the ceremonies that we seem to have developed after Zoom is the Shiva on Zoom. And what struck me very much was very recently when Bill Rosenblum died, some of us were at the cemetery, but many people couldn't make it. But that Sunday night, in a ceremony that some of us barely made it back from the cemetery in time to do it, we had a few hours on Zoom to share recollections. And it's very different. I've been to, I don't know how many Shivas in my life. I grew up conservadox. But a Shiva in which there is no designated mourner is a very different thing. And I think it's only a CBST thing, just like we, before Bill even died, Cantor Rosen had a sign-up sheet to say Kaddish for Bill. And I think that's something very unique to CBST.
Yeah, we didn't do it before he died, but we did do it after he died. You're right. And that and I do agree, the Zoom Shiva, I am shocked at how moving it is. And to see people from all over the world be able to be at a Zoom Shiva. What? Yes, and being able to also show photographs in a Zoom Shiva and little videos and being able to, very, very, very powerful. I think it's an example of some things we're doing a Zoom Shiva for Nancy Alpert.
I'm monitoring this chat.
And, Nancy Alpert we're doing a Zoom Shiva on Tuesday nights it's fantastic. COVID makes this possible. She has a lot of relatives in Boston. It's fantastic. We now are using Zoom Shiva not because of COVID necessarily, but it provides a way for people to participate who are not local. And honestly, New York City apartments are tiny. So it's also possible to be able to include people that wouldn't be physically so comfortable. All right, we're going to wind it down.
Okay, my question for you guys is, so I'm almost 13. Me and my family are trying to think about like mitzvahs and stuff, but we're really busy. And I was wondering what for you guys, what you thought the most important takeaway from the entire experience was.
Of the Bar Mitzvah, well, Mazel Tov to you. And of what's the most important part of a new Bar Mitzvah for Judy and Lori? Is that the question?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, how would you answer that question to a 13-year-old?
I think it's because usually they do it just one person. So the community probably, although they may be in class with other. So I would think just being able to say that you are entering into dialogue with this really old tradition, sort of awesome, just thinking about that. And some skills you might know. And I tried to tell my grandsons if they could just learn the alphabet, maybe when they got older, they would be a leg up and they would already know Hebrew, but it didn't work in my family. But for you, I think it's a really exciting that you're even thinking about it, and that since you have a choice and you're thinking about it.
All right, well, I want to say that was a great question to end on, and it fits into our multi-generational theme of our time together. So in our 50th anniversary, thank you to the four of you for sharing some of your life experience and thoughts, and to all of the questions and comments. And tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. services. Tomorrow evening, 9 o'clock, Rabbi Werber's teaching. And then at 10 o'clock, Cantor Rosen, Joyce, and I are leading Slichot services with Janet Pavlov sounding shofar. And cemetery, 12:30 on Sunday. And then what time are Rosh Hashanah services, Harold? Monday? I don't remember.
Services are at 6:30, but we will have security and we will have the usual, there's no reserved seats. Please come early. Please come 45 minutes early to get settled in safely and calmly so that we can start at 6:30 with everybody in their seat. Is it 6:30 or 6? Someone, well, look at your email and come 45 minutes before the email says the services start.
I honestly don't remember, that's why I put you on the spot.
So I didn't put you on the spot to say the CBST Life Cycle event that nearly cost the Hotel Dave, the King David Hotel